Hey, Future Lawyer. Welcome to the LSAT Simplified podcast presented by Hey Future Lawyer, where we talk about all things LSAT, law school admissions, and otherwise. If you want to check out our free LSAT course, go to heyfuturelawyer.com to sign up for a free account today. Madeline is back. Welcome back, Madeline. What have you been up to
Hello.
past month or so?
Been in school. School's cooking. Fall semester's going. I think actually I didn't mention this to you earlier, but I was something I've been talking about with some peers at school is that what I have found difficult, I think, this month was that kind of the initial, I don't want to say like adrenaline, but like initial kind of rush or energy of like the beginning of the semester and like, starting something new, all of that was started to wear off a little bit in the sense that I just think like the work aspect and the discipline of keeping up with everything and like the grind part of law school I found to be a little bit tougher this month, more from like a motivational standpoint. I think big picture that's still the same, but just like, ooh, okay, you finish something for one day and it never ends, right? But I mean that's how the profession is. So I think they just try to get you used to that. Working on my memo, kind of the big for anyone listening, you might be aware of this, but in your first semester, you typically have your doctrinal courses, but then you also take your research and writing class, and part of that you write a sort of legal or like office memo based off a certain legal issue. For I don't know how it is at other schools, but our issues is or the issue that we write about is based in tort law. But it's I enjoy the process of it, but it's a bit of a I don't want to say tedious assignment because again I enjoy it, but it's definitely time consuming and trying to balance the time expenditure for that with all my other classes, keeping up with the reading, looking forward towards exams, outlining, studying. It's definitely starting to pile up a little bit, but overall still good.
That torts memo sounds riveting. I'm so bummed I didn't go to law school and I don't get to do that.
Well,
Well,
interestingly, the sort of factual scenario about it is about this like boy who gets injured by like a soccer goal at like the church that his youth soccer league plays at. And my own son has the same birthday as like the pretend boy in this fact set and also plays youth soccer and they play their games at the church. And so it's funny to me because when I read it, I'm like, oh, this is like literally my life on the
is
weekends. But
is this a fake case that they just made up, or is it based on?
it's fake, yeah. But I found it
So,
amusing because I'm like, oh, this is my son.
so I'll like way oversimplify it just because I'm not, legally educated. But I do have my little LSAT brain. So is it just like who's liable, or what's the like
It's
question?
what the topic is what's called the attractive nuisance doctrine. That basically, a landowner is not liable for negligence
Oh, is it
typically
like
in the case of a trespasser, but when the trespasser is a child and there's something that appeals to them, often in a situation like a trampoline or something like that, and they get
sure.
injured,
Yeah, kids are
that's
stupid.
yeah.
They go
So
chasing
it's
them.
whether or not that doctrine will apply here, whether this like soccer goal that was like
Um,
unsecured injured him.
oh, so like was it not? So it wasn't a soccer game. It was like the kid just saw the goal and like ran up
The
to it.
goal was yeah, the goal was there and it was like unsecured basically because typically like they're not permanent goals, they're goals that they move in and out and I
I
guess they're
see.
heavy, whatever. And so yeah, it wasn't a game. He was just like
And
there.
out of curiosity, do you argue one side or the other, or is this more of like an academic, like here's the issues and what apply?
So it's meant to the nature of the facts or sort of designed so that technically, like, there's no right answer. You could argue either side, but it's based off the research that you do about the law, the case law, the facts in the relevant cases, and the facts that we have here. What would you predict is the most likely outcome in terms of what the court would like hold? But the
I see.
way it's written is that like you could do either way. It's not like there's like a blatant like yes or no, and that like you totally lose points if you answer the wrong way.
Yeah, it's tricky. Because I guess yeah, it sounds like very LSAT almost, where you have to like consider the
A
fact,
bit,
consider the
yeah,
decision, what would strengthen it, what would weaken it. 'Cause
yeah.
I mean, a lot of it seems like it would hinge on like, is a soccer ball really? I mean, I wouldn't consider this is not like my legal analysis, but a soccer goal to me does not seem like a giant thing of candy that is like luring children in. And you
Hmm.
can have that for perfectly rational reasons. And I think that a kid is going to sprint up to it and then bang his head on it. I don't know. Initially, I'm just like, that's silly, like stupid kid. Like I don't know, but
Well,
I know
actually,
it's
and
more.
this is like sort of and that's exactly like the kind of prevailing viewpoint. But if it's a situation where like the danger of it's unforeseeable to the kid, like it can move and they wouldn't realize it or something, that's when there would be a duty. So in this case, like it's not accidental that the goals are like mobile basically. And what happened, he got injured because like a wind gust like blew it over basically and like hit him.
I see.
Yeah.
Must have been a crazy wind gust because like, how's it picking up a
It seems
soccer
kind of
in
still. I
once?
know. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
nuts.
but it's just
But
part of the facts. Yeah,
I
I
get the
agree.
point. Like, there's an act of God that made this seemingly not dangerous item quite dangerous. Yeah, it's a yeah, I don't know. I always wonder because I do think that there are legitimately the sickos that enjoy this kind of intellectual exercise. I also talk to a lot of LSAT people that I think are not those sickos. They are just 22-year-olds and they want a prestigious career, so they go to law school without naming
Mhm.
names. Although of course you'll tell me after the we get off. Have you noticed anyone in your classes that like is not there for the right reasons, or is that pretty hard to discern?
It's it's hard to discern. I'm sure they exist, and I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about in a previous conversation about how I think it's less so that because again, a lot of the students are like 21, 22, that like they're truly like, oh, I'm just here to do the motions to get the prestigious career, and more so that they just think the motions of law school will just naturally result in a certain end that they want. I don't know if that distinction makes sense, but
I get what you're saying.
I think it's more of like a passive prestige thing than like act or a career than
Yeah,
like
I get
an
what you're
active
saying.
decision for me to do it this way. At the same time, I think though it also would probably be hard to be like discern explicitly, but I'm sure there's people
Have
that
you, I guess,
have that mindset.
a follow up to that is, have you noticed any ghosts that are like not showing up to class anymore, or are people pretty good about taking it seriously?
No, people are pretty good. I would say it's pretty rare for people to be absent. I think like in my sections, I've actually had to miss 2 days, which I think is pretty relatively high. I was sick one day and then my son had like a field trip and it was fine. Like the professor was totally chill about it. But yeah, people are pretty much always there. To the point that like if someone's absent, I typically notice it. For example, there's this guy I sit next to in contracts and he wasn't there, and I was like, oh, he's probably sick. I feel like everyone's starting to get sick right now. So I feel like the predominant absences. It's hard to tell if absences have picked up slightly due to people getting sick more now, or if people are just more likely to be like, I just am tired today, I can't do it. I'm just gonna
Right.
take a day, and they don't mind. I mean, again, it's perfectly. I think all the professors, like, if you're just like, I need a day, they're not gonna. You have like X amount of like unexcused absences within reason, of course, but so I haven't noticed like, well, I haven't noticed people just like completely dipping, but also because you can't. If you miss too many classes, excused or unexcused, you cannot get credit to pass the class. It's not like
Gotcha.
undergrad where you can just literally not go at all.
Yeah, that was I didn't
There's
go
like
to my.
a there's like a ABA like standard or something, a requirement.
Yeah, it's probably good. It is fascinating to me because it seems like people, when the consequences are there, or at least they're immediate, they're able to pencil things into their calendar. No, not to.
Yeah.
I was telling Madeline this before we got on, but I tie everything back to the LSAT just because that's how like my brain works because I do it all day, every day. But this immediately ties back to the LSAT. I'm like, how can these people go to all their classes? Which how many do you all have? Like two or three a day for like the week? So like 10.
Typically, yeah, I would say yeah, 2 or 3 a day. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's like way more than the LSAT. And sure, you're doing the LSAT on top of other responsibilities, but it's crazy because like people will not study consistently for the LSAT. In fact, most of you don't. That's like the biggest reason you all fail is that you guys just, when for the podcast crew, you guys are probably better because if not, I'd probably make you feel bad by constantly telling you that it's your fault. But anyway, it's like people will choose not to study for an hour a day for like 3 to 6 months, which will legitimately cost them $150,000 in tuition, and then they'll show up to law school. Like to me, that makes no sense. It seems almost backwards to me. But not say you shouldn't go to law school, but it's just so funny when the consequences are disconnected from the action to where like obviously you have to pay the money and not taking the LSAT seriously will it cost you like multi hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's future you in like 5 years. And it feels very and also it's kind of like the standard behavior to not take it seriously. Um,
Mhm.
but for me, it's just like the most perplexing thing I go through because like honestly, people should. I mean, I just don't get why people don't take it seriously. Like you have classmates who I'm sure intellectually were capable of like a 170 and ended
Mm.
with like a 160 because they just wanted to go this year or they didn't want to study because they had like
Yeah,
nights or they wanted to have a fun senior year. So I don't want to take the LSAT again for scholarship purposes. Like I'll just go. And it's to me it
yeah,
makes
definitely.
anyway, that's me completely hijacking it to make it about the LSAT, which is pretty typical. But I did feel like you touch on it because it blows my mind. I for sure thought, based on the effort I see from the average 159, that these people would not be going to class. But maybe that's just
But
because
it's
it's,
more so like you literally have to for the
yeah,
most part. And there's certain classes where like if you exceed, not to the point of like the ABA stuff, but like if you just exceed like, a handful of unexcused absences, it can like impact your grade. Like professors have the discretion to negatively adjust your grade if they think you've missed what they deem to be too many unexcused absences, which would be like in cases of
yeah,
like you're just missing. Obviously, if you're ill or sick, like that's fine.
yeah. I think it's also an interesting point that you say like it might be illness. Like I personally, I got the flu this past weekend, which I know stuff like that's going around. It sounds like you got something as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and you only missed one day. Was it just like a really bad day, or was it fortunately like on the front or back end of a weekend?
No, so yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. It was like a stomach situation. It wasn't like a like fever flu. So I was just, not pleasant. I'll spare the details, but because of that, it was just a day. And it was really more so the prior like night. I don't know. And then because I didn't sleep at all, I was like, I am not gonna be functioning basically. So I'm like, I just need to take the day and sleep. And then I was fine to go the next day.
That makes sense. Yeah, and then also
Yeah.
kind of the magic of law school. Not to say it's worn off, but whenever you start something new, it's
I think
exciting.
it's like anytime you adjust to anything, like I feel like what propelled me a lot that first month was like, it's all so new, like this new environment, this new schedule, this new routine. And I still enjoy it, but it's just the newness right, has worn off. So there's just some days where I'm like, I just don't feel like sitting down and reading my contract stuff right now. And again, it kind of tied back to the LSAT. When you study for the LSAT, it doesn't matter how motivated you are to like do it, to go to law school, all that stuff. There's just going to be days where you don't feel like doing it. And what makes the difference is sitting down and doing it, because where nine people are going to be like, it's fine, I'll go chill. It's the person who is going to stick and do it, who's going to do it and show up. They're going to see the
Yeah,
result.
yeah, I completely get what you're saying. Because it's something I find is really interesting is I can no longer engage someone based on my first couple touch points with them. Because what I realize is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people have I'm not sure if like dopamine is the right way to put it, but because they're starting something, they're incredibly excited about it. But it's not
Yeah.
all of who sticks with it. Because I'll have people where I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be like the best student ever. And then class three of the month comes around and I just don't see them again. It's like, what happened? It's like
Yeah.
you were so excited, you were like happy to be doing questions, you were talking about the law schools you're gonna go to, the LSAT you're gonna go, which like, don't get me wrong, can be true, but then they're gone. It's like, oh man, I thought for sure you were like a type A winner. And this is meant to be like a character judgment, but it's just certainly the excitement of things wears off and that can lead to
Yeah, and you have to put in the work, and it's not fun. I sometimes refer to this as like, this is what like in the movies they would turn into a montage. You know what I mean? Like they're never actually going
yeah,
to show like Elwood studying for the LSAT. That's a song and a montage. You don't actually see the work of her doing it in the movie, or like Mulan training to defeat the Huns or whatever. Like it's a song montage. Like you don't actually like, the movie would be far less interesting if the whole thing was all of the work that they had to do to get this outcome. At the same time, though, I feel like all that work that again they condense into a montage, like that is what enables them to like do all of these things that they do, right? And so I think it's sometimes easy in real life to be like, to think like, oh, I don't actually have to do this work. It'll just happen, right? In the movies, it just happens, right? Or whatever. But it's not very glamorous, but I think
yeah,
it's important.
yeah. I don't know. It's so interesting because like what does separate people, at least in my opinion, is like do you stick with it? And it's not even like, of course you're gonna have bad days, and I think there is some grace with yourself, but the amount of people that just like immediately, not immediately, but very quickly give up on things. And it's like, well, yeah, no wonder you
Hmm.
didn't make any progress. Like you know, the first steps of anything don't really lead to immediate results. You have to like stick with it. Um, Anyway, yeah, but yeah, the montage point's really good. I kind of feel like I'm going through that because over the past year, I've been creating a video explanation to every single LSI question ever, at least for prep
Mhm.
test 101 through 158, as well as text explanations and categorizing them all by difficulty and question type. And it is just a monster of a project. And I have a whole
Yeah.
doc where I look at it, and I mean, I've done so much work. I work on it
Yeah.
for a few hours every day, and it still stares back at me and like, you're not even started. Or I mean, that's how it feels. Obviously, we've made a lot of,
Yeah.
but you don't see the ones that are gone because I just cross them off and delete them. I just see the ones that are still to be done, and it's still 8 pages that I have to do the way that I have it organized. But all you can do is like, well, I'm going to sit down and do 2 hours of that, and then I'll come back tomorrow, and then the day after. But if I look
Yeah.
at it as like this is such an overwhelming project, it just never gets done. So you kind of have to just eat it one bite at a time. Um, well, with that, I'm curious. So, just to keep it on law school stuff before we switch to LSAT, which will completely piss off all the listeners, but it's my podcast, so I can do what I want. Um, there's been some news out of, no offense, but higher ranked schools, more prestigious legal institutions, where, for what's worth, Madeline did get admitted to. She chose to go to Kentucky given life circumstances. So I'll give you, like, you could have been there. But they've started taking applications to stuff really quick. In fact, this is from Harvard and Yale. They said that, hold on, what did they say? The recruiting process has accelerated to so early on. I mean, there's a large law firm that has its applications for next summer open right now for incoming admitted students who have not yet started 1L orientation. So I'm not sure whether this is Harvard or Yale, but it's one of them. And then
Mhm.
they continue. We joke about just sending the list to our incoming 1Ls to the firms. Soon they're going to ask us just to send them to the law firms so that the summer before they even start, they can lock in their post grad jobs. Like, it's lunacy. Anyway, so I guess questions on that. Because typically the way that Kentucky would work, I'm not sure how many people you guys send to BigLaw, and obviously BigLaw is not the only legal career out there, but are people aware that like the direct application is kind of the way it's going nowadays as opposed to OCI, or is that not really talked about on campus?
I would say I think people are decently aware. I think what's important to recognize is obviously there's like a market difference here between, like Lexington does not have like the traditional big law in the sense of like the Cravath scale firms, et cetera. Like there's just that there's no market here. We have like large law firms that are here, but it's not the same like recruiting process. So those firms will still do OCIs, I think, in January and February. But again, these would be for like the big firms in like Kentucky, probably Southern Ohio,
Yeah,
region. So obviously this is very different than if you want to go to like for New York, right? It's kind of like the stereotypical DC, right? Um, so I don't know honestly how aware people are of that, but be, I don't know how many people are interested in doing that type of like going to New York and doing like that big law. So I feel I will say I feel like most people who come to law school here, that's not at least geographically their goal. And are probably more those who are interested in doing more corporate law. I assume just kind of based off my interactions with people that it is more of a regional interest. And so the recruitment's a little bit different. But I don't know. It could be a situation though where someone's like, next summer, or like spring is like, oh, I want to work in a corporate firm in New York, and it's like, well, you out of luck, But it's hard to gauge that awareness, mostly because it's just that I'm not concerned with it personally, so I'm just a little bit in my
sure.
own
Yeah, I just find it
tunnel.
interesting because I guess my impression is that that often is the expectations people have. And perhaps
Yeah,
it's a sample of people that actually choose to attend Kentucky versus I often talk to people that attend lower ranked schools in like New York, where this is also true. Like, I mean, not to say that like Fordham, I mean, Fordham's going to be fine, but like St. John's, I'm sure is really getting hurt by this, where often they would send the top of their class to these schools. But now if all the
yeah,
kids are applying before
yeah.
come out. So
I was
anyway,
gonna say, I think there's a big regional difference because I think, yeah, if you're a lower ranked school in these markets that are, that have these, you know, obviously really highly ranked schools, then it's just really hard to compete with that. But UK has somewhat of a monopoly of the market in this region. And, sure, if a Harvard grad swooped in and wanted to work in Lexington, yeah, they could probably get that job. But,
sure.
the thing is, it's a little bit incestuous here where like, so much of the legal fabric of the state is comprised of like UK alum. And so I think it's a little bit different. I think sometimes the lower ranked like regional flagship state schools, I don't say have an advantage, but for example, a great example I actually think of, because it's a worse ranked school, is when I lived in Idaho, that their schools ranked like 140 or something, but it is the only law school in Idaho. And you best believe probably the vast majority of the lawyers in that state and the judges, all that stuff are probably grads from there. Maybe not the vast majority, but a solid amount. And, you know, those people who live there and are interested in that market will be just fine out there. But again, it's very different from a question of wanting to work at, you know,
Yeah, no,
New
it's an
York, big
interesting
law,
point,
etc.
especially for the well, I don't say this as a slight, but the like less desirable states, the ones that people just tend not to speak of.
No, I mean,
Um,
yeah,
there's a better because like if you go to a low rank school in California, you're in for trouble because there's like 10 schools ahead of you.
yeah,
And then further, people from New York move. I mean, because you raise a good point. Like, could a Harvard grad theoretically come to a Kentucky firm and not take a spot? But I guess take a spot. I mean, they could, but
yeah,
there's not that many that will. So even though like it
yeah.
could happen, the I
And
yeah.
well, and interestingly, there's kind of like especially in some of these more like I would say kind of more remote slash like rural states, there's definitely this like in status versus out status of like the community and the place where like you know if you have a bunch of you know old boys from Kentucky, they're not gonna like the Yale grad, you know what I mean, or something like that. They're, I mean, they obviously if they're very qualified and all that stuff. Like I'm not saying that that would be the sole
Yeah.
decision maker, but like for example, when I think of Idaho, if you had someone come in from Stanford, they would be viewed with a lot of skepticism, not in terms of like their capabilities, but just in terms of I think their I don't know life outlook. Which is
Yeah.
I'm not endorsing this at all or saying that that's a good perspective to have, but I think it's just kind of a nuance to it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Because obviously when it comes to law school, there's, a lot of different outcomes and it sometimes gets overly simplified, or at least we talk a lot about BigLaw. And I think that's largely just because, and by we, I know we don't talk quite as much about it as in you and I, but I work
Mhm.
with other folks.
But like not at large, yeah.
Yeah, just because like at least for the people going for it, for the kind of like the lawyers and doctors sentence, it's like that really only makes sense with like big law lawyers. So the rest of the
Yeah.
lawyers, not that it's a bad career, but it's a lot more like you're more like an accountant than you are a doctor if you're like an average lawyer. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. But I find that the like where I tend to, I don't know, focus on this is less so that I like to kick people and be like, you go to this school or like, your outcomes are this, because like there's no fun in that. But more so the disconnect of if people go to a school like Kentucky, they should be aware that like your job opportunities are probably going to be, potentially work. Like if you crush it, you can probably get some interview. Like if you're like the valedictorian, I'm sure the valedictorian can interview at Kirkland if they really want to at Kentucky. Like that can happen.
Hmm.
There are federal like courts that the top grads will get like considered at. But the average person is not going to have those positions, and
Yeah.
not even like the top 20% will have those options. It's going to be very, very limited, which I just want folks to know because I've just had too many conversations over the past 5 years of people that think law degrees are like medical degrees, where everyone just gets like a $400,000 job. And it's just, I mean, even I was doing research yesterday, but the
Hmm.
average partner salary is only, I say only, but it's only 600K for these non-equity partners, which are now becoming very common in
Hmm.
law firms where you're at
Yeah.
Kirkland, they call you a partner, but you're not really a partner. It's just like a
Yeah.
title. I call them pinos. It's like rhinos. Rhinos in name only. It's
Oh
partner in name
yeah.
only. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to get it to catch on. I made an Instagram post with it and I have pinos in it like 10 times. I do explain it early on. But anyway, it's interesting though, because like that is, I don't know, that's like comparable to like what I think like a pretty, not average doctor, but like what a well-off doctor is making. And it's like that's what law firm partners are making, which is that's not an easy position to get to become even a name, not a name partner, but even a partner in name at Kirkland is not an easy gig. It's still like 8 years
Yeah.
in New York big law, or not New York big, but big law. So it's just,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like for those of you that want to go to law school because you want to like be an equity partner at Kirkland and make $20 million one day, it is possible. Also, if you're someone who's like gonna settle at anything less than like a 175, I don't think you're that guy. And there's a lot of people we talk to, and maybe I should just say this as opposed to like using the pronoun we, but I talk to people that like they can't be bothered to get a 160, and then they think they're gonna be a partner at Kirkland. It's like I don't know who told you. Like
Yeah.
your parents were a little too encouraging. Because I'm all for encouragement, but also encouragement based in reality. Like if you're not gonna do the work, you're not gonna get the outcome. It's quite simple.
Hmm.
Okay, well that's fine. Overall, though, I'm very curious to see kind of what people end up doing in the 1L summers. Is that completely far away? Has anyone started looking, or does that start happening further down the road?
There's it's kind of this weird thing where like there are certain like you could technically apply or like, certain things, but for example, for a lot of like the firms here, right? I say firm, I'm using quotes because it wouldn't be like Kirkland or whatever, but like here they would do recruiting like January. So I'd say for the most part here, it's like probably all starts in January. But there's probably certain opportunities that like you could kind of go for.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I'm kind of like I'm sort of like I don't even know how to figure out childcare for the summer. Because my son's too young for like most summer camps, and but I don't want to pay for a nanny, so sort of like,
Yeah.
we'll see. Part of me, I'm just like, I don't even want to work in the summer or do LSAT.
Yeah,
But
be an LSAT dork. It's a good gig.
yeah, I think so.
Anyway, yeah, I was looking at because I think it's very interesting that I mean, honestly, they should wait for grades. I don't know why these top firms are not because even at like there are crazy people that make it past the admissions teams at these top schools, and
Well,
they also
that's what I was gonna say. Or I feel like too,
yeah,
there's a lot. What about I don't want to wade into some dicey territory here. Not to say obviously there's gonna be tons and tons of
there
qualified
are
great
people
students.
that the admissions team took a flyer on that do not have the numbers representative of that school. So Harvard has people
Yeah.
that are not Harvard material, but they take a few of them
Yeah.
every year because they have the room because they can balance them out with the people that are like 184.0. So you can take a 165 3.6, which is not a dumb
Yeah.
person. That is not a Harvard caliber law student. And so if the firms are hiring those people,
Well,
then
yeah. And there's also, I would say, probably, especially because I think people at a lot of these schools disproportionately, I would say, come from like advantaged backgrounds. They're like, oh, daddy bought a doctor to buy me double time, even though like I have no demonstrated need for it. Except the only reason now I have this ability to even score in the 170s is because I have time, etc. Not to say that's not a majority of people, but they're there, and they fly. I
it
think
might
through
be
the
a
ground
majority.
sometimes.
I don't know that
But,
it is, but it's
well,
getting there. Like it's really high.
I
So
feel like I'm not allowed to say that. So,
I can say, well, I mean,
um,
we for sure don't know the stats, and LSAT does not release
yeah,
them, but
yeah,
it is out of control. For the people I work with, it is like I just mention it because I feel like it's my job as an LSAT person to just inform, and people do with that what they will. I basically tell them, here's the system that exists, do with it what you will. And most people go and get accommodations, and no one ever gets denied, is what it comes down to. And people that like
yeah.
have no history, it's just like, oh yeah, I get stressed about the LSAT, which don't we all? I had an LSAT dream before I took the test. I had multiple logic game streams actually. I remember diagramming out logic games in my dreams, and it's so funny because like I don't know, it's just like you go to a psychologist, you can probably convince them to write accommodations for that and be like, I'm tweaking, and it's genuinely true, like that actually happened. But also, I took the LSAT
Well,
anyway.
yeah, and so
Uh,
this is where, for example, the school is not then necessarily going to be the best proxy for these things. I mean, it's partially, of course, but it's imperfect because what if you have an applicant at a much lower ranked school who also had a fantastic LSAT and GPA, chose to go to lower ranked school, um, you know, didn't have purchased extra time from a doctor, et cetera. I don't know, something like that. Versus, and it's hard to do a comparison with that, but I don't know. It's not. I agree. I think it's kind of unwise to
well,
not
I will go out
the
there and give
grades.
my like very politically incorrect accommodations take, which is that accommodations for learning disabilities need to be eliminated. The whole point was for people that have like actual disabilities, like bone cancer or blindness, and then it got extrapolated
Yeah.
like ADHD. And I would recommend not tying yourself to this. This one does not get me fan mail. But I like ADHD, anxiety. Like you guys don't deserve accommodations. It's just the whole point of this test is to differentiate intellectual disabilities, and that isn't intellectual, not disability, but intellectual differences. And like that's fine, is what it is. We all have our pros and we all have our cons, but that's one of your cons. And eliminating it is actually eliminating the whole purpose of the test, which is to see who is good at these skills under stressful conditions and who is not. And you can argue that that's not the purpose of the LSAT and that we should have a different test, but that's a different question. Not should we change the test for people that have diagnoses and further, very fickle diagnoses. Like if you go and you answer the questions right, anyone can get diagnosed with anxiety or ADHD. And I know this because I have friends who have gotten diagnosed with ADHD just to get the Adderall. Because all you have to do is look
Yeah.
at questions and say, here's what they ask you, here's what you say. So anyone can get it. So when someone's like, I have an ADHD diagnosis, therefore I deserve special treatment, I get really sick of it. And also because the test is way easier with double time. People hate to hear that, but like this is a time constrained test. When you have double the time to think through every question, you can think through it a lot more, and all the answers are hidden in the text. Like the LSAT is a test of perfect information. Your job is just to decipher
Hmm.
it. more time to decipher equals easier. And I've had to argue this with people, but it's like just as a thought experiment, is taking the LSAT in 5 minutes easier, or is it taking in 1 hour easier? And people will go like, well, of course you can't do it in 5 minutes. It's like, yeah, no shit. But then why is the difference between 35 and an hour? It's not as extreme. Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah. So anyway, that's my take on accommodations, which is just the intent was well-meaning. And further, the other issue is that they can never actually do my recommendation because the ADA would sue the shit out of them, or not the ADA, people on behalf. They would sue, citing the ADA or whatever. You can
Hmm.
explain how to do that via, is that civil procedure? They tell you like what courts things go through.
Yeah, that's civil procedure.
Yeah, so I guess some like nonprofit or someone or class action could sue LSAC, like you guys are denying anxiety. And I think as written, they probably would lose, which has put LSAC in a real pickle. I mean, my understanding
Hmm.
is that LSAC is not happy with the accommodations. They will never say this, but I think they want to get rid of them. So what one student I
Well,
had,
it's probably, I think, again, I know we've talked about this. I think it partially explains, I mean, these insane medians at these schools, or like these, really high LSAT scores, in a way that kind of undermines the credibility of the exam, right? Because whoever has a super high score, then how do we discern, or how do we distinguish, I should say. And yeah, I feel like that, I mean, I don't know, but I feel like it's probably stressing them out a little bit.
well, it's tricky because I think it comes from a very well-meaning, good place. And on the cases that it was decided on, which the case, and I will say this, I really should look this up, but I'm pretty sure it was legitimately someone with like leukemia asking to stretch between sections, which like that's a very reasonable accommodation. That it's not like you're giving
Yeah.
them advantages. But I think the question is, at what point does it become advantages versus at what point? And I don't know at what point we as a society just decided that extra time is like the standard like reconciliation for this, but it
Yeah.
seems like it's a terrible, at least for a time pressure test, it's like the worst way to, I mean, who would deserve extra time? I'm trying to think about like, is there any argument for extra time on the LSAT? Because the only people that it seems to benefit are people with learning disabilities, which I like for sure are real. Like, people for sure have ADHD, they for sure have anxiety, all that stuff. But is that not the point? I don't know. To me, it's just it makes no sense. But and this one's super unpopular because everyone just responds to this with like an ADA, which if that's going to be your comment, please just save your breath because I know what the ADA says. It's just I don't think it makes any sense. Um, anyway, someone actually, I'll tell you this after we get off the pod actually, but um, it's an interesting point. Okay, cool. So yeah, with that, yeah, I had another. I don't know if you've been following because Madeline, I think you've said that you are admittedly less in the LSAT and admissions world as you have other life stuff going on with obviously you're a busy person and you have law school. Are you familiar with the whole LSAT cheating situation, or is this something that you've avoided?
What happened in China?
Yeah.
That one? Yeah, I'm like loosely familiar. That was that they had access to like the unpublished exams. Is that what it was, or
Yeah, so they had
something like
a
that?
well, it
Yeah.
was it was a few things. I mean, there were multiple companies or organizations or whatever you want to call doing this in China. One of which was just taking the test for people via they would have
Mm.
exam banks. Basically, they would record remotely on their computer what was happening, using software that LSAC could not detect. I'm not the most technical person, but I am more technical than the average person listening, just through the nature of building a website. Well, I will say is that LSAC cannot stop this. Like there's no workaround to stopping people from recording on their devices if they want to. There's no
Yeah.
so anyway, so they did that, and then one company was even selling the old LSAT. So you could not pay someone to take it for you. Instead, you could just buy the data, study all like 400 LSAT, or not 400, but it's an absurd amount. It's like more than they've released. And through studying,
Hmm.
you might, recognize the questions as you see them. And then further, you just
Yeah.
practice material as well. Although to be fair, if you're cheating, you probably wouldn't practice. I can't imagine. Um, so yeah, I guess my thought on this is that this is basically going to force them to go back in person. I guess maybe this isn't the best conversation topic, given that you're not the most, but you can, you're a smart person and use your LSAT deduction. Like, do you think LSCC has another way around this, given the premises of tests are compromised, they need a test that they can administer without being cheated, and given their defensive technology, I just don't think there's a way around it. Am I wrong, at least in my quick logic, to think that in person is really the only way that they can rectify this?
I mean, it's tough. I feel like in some ways it's kind of analogous to like, when you hear complaints of like high school students or college students of like, oh, everyone's just doing their essays on chat GPT, so like we need to bring back writing like in class manual
Right.
essays, etc. Like in some ways it's kind of like that. That like if kind of in the sense that like if this is the one way we can like guarantee with 100% certainty that you cannot, there's probably still ways to cheat in for somehow, I don't know, but not in the same manner, then it's it's tough, especially. I mean, as someone who's not particularly tech savvy, I mean, I know that LSAC isn't either. Like relatively. Um, and I don't know. I just feel like it's a losing battle for them to try to find some sort of solution or like I don't know. From what I've heard from people though, I don't know if this is your experience because I'm someone who took the exam and I think you did too remotely because of COVID, and I personally really enjoyed taking it that way. But from what I hear from most people I work with, they really prefer doing it in person.
Yeah, I
Um,
had the same experience because I thought, I mean, it's so much more convenient, at least for me to take it from. So
yeah,
my mom vacuumed the day I took the LSAT, which pissed me off because I was home during COVID, and I was fine because like, if you're good at the LSAT, you're still good at the LSAT. Maybe it cost me like a point, but like definitely didn't completely throw me off. Yeah, I know. I heard the same thing where almost everyone seems to want to take it in person, which to me is perplexing because often you have to travel to the site. You also have to deal with
yeah,
people. You don't take it in your environment. I don't know. I mean, I have my theories for it. One of my theories is that I think people are hoping that like the game day effect will save them, when in reality they should have just prepped better. But yeah, I don't know. I think
yeah.
it's the same thing.
I'm kind of the opposite. I mean, I was really happy to take it remote because I mean, I just think about back to my standardized tests I took in high school, which were all in person, and like I just like never loved having to drive. Like I remember like when I took my ACT, I had to go to like some random school I'd never been to that was like 40 minutes away, and like or just like I don't like having to deal with like additional factors to think about when I just want to show up, hit click, take my test.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Some people or a lot of people don't feel that way.
Well, and my take on it is, well, it's just like do what's best for you because it's like fundamentally it doesn't really matter if you're good at the test, you're good at
Yeah,
it's on your device.
yeah,
But it's also funny because the learning studies do show that when you study in an environment and then you take it in the environment, there is some subtle connection that happens in your brain, and like you do perform better. So if you studied at your
yeah,
desk, you take it at your desk. It seems like I don't know. It was always odd to me when people were like very hesitant to take it online, and part of it was LSAC did have really bad control of the
yeah. Well, that
proctor.
was over the proctoring. That makes sense.
But that also I found to be often exaggerated online because the people that had issues would be the loudest about it, whereas people
Yeah,
well, yeah, I'm trying to remember how when I took it, it went pretty smooth, I would say. I mean,
mine was fine. I had no issues at all.
they're definitely outsourced. I don't know that they're the best trained, but also I was taking it in 35 minutes. And when we took it, it was a different company actually. I think wasn't it
It was
Procter?
Proctor. It was Proctor U. From what I've heard, I think it's just gotten worse with Prometric. But still, I feel like you're disproportionately likely to hear about the bad stories.
Yeah, most people I have are like, yeah, it went fine. And the one thing I do hear is
Yeah.
it gets abandoned mid, but I also hear horror stories in person. So it's like it's not isolated too
That's
well.
what I hear too, because like obviously I never took it in person, but from what I've heard, it like really just depends on the testing center. And like,
Yeah.
someone was like, oh, people were coming like in and out, like the proctors were talking, and like, yeah, like you kind of like that's fair game. I mean, like you kind of have to expect like the unexpected sometimes with these
Yeah, there's all
things. I
sorts of
don't
stuff.
know.
I heard one of like someone next to them crunching on ice while they were taking their test, which is
Oh,
irritating. Another I heard
yeah,
about the AC being turned down to like 62 or something, like really cold to the point where it's like, oh my God, like it's freezing for it being, indoors. Anyway, it
yeah.
was just, I don't know. Though to be fair, at least something that I would spend almost no mental calories on if I was someone studying. It's just, it's not important. Like if you're good at the test, you're gonna be fine. If you're bad at the test, you're fucked either way. So it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, what else do we have? Yeah, the UVA median is interesting. I mentioned, or we talked about this briefly, and UVA is a school that you are near and dear to, given that you were accepted last year as the fourth ranked block. Um, but they had a median this past year. I don't know what it is. I want to say it's like a 4.04, but their median is literally above a 4.0. So I guess
Yeah.
I'll let you be my voice for me. But what do you think this says about how holistic these law schools actually are?
Well, it definitely does not suggest that they are particularly holistic. Because, and we were talking about this earlier, but most undergrad institutions don't have GPA scales that go over 4.0. So if they are trying to, rig the medians higher, then they're going to be very intentionally selective about, choosing people from institutions that will allow for 4.0 plus GPAs, which again was not my undergrad institution. I mean, I didn't have a 4.0 anyway, but that's just the point. But I know it's telling
Well, I
in
will
not in a
note
good way.
it doesn't only help people that got 4.0s. It also has people that got a 3.8, but then they got 3 A pluses throughout their undergrad. So they get to anchor it upwards. So even a 4.0 from UVA could mean that they got an A minus in a class. but they balance it out with a higher. So it's incredibly unfair. I'm actually looking off to the side how many undergrads actually give out A pluses because from my small sample, when I talk to people, I don't know that I've ever talked to someone where it's like, yeah, my undergrad gives that out as a practice. I went to two universities, neither of
Mm.
them give out A pluses. I don't think I know anyone that got it. I mean, it does happen. Those people are out there. Oh, is it like the Ivies? Like
Our
who?
school, so we had A plus, but it wasn't like that was the 4.0. Like if you got just an A, it was like a 3.8 or 3.7. Like if you wanted your 4.0, you had to get A plus.
What were
That's how
your
it
what were the
worked for
cutoffs
us.
for that?
For like the
Yeah,
different
like
like
what would give you an A plus versus I mean, was it by class or was it standardized?
it was I think by class, like it was by class, I
Oh,
think.
okay.
I'm not sure how it, but like whatever the metric was for that class to be an A plus. And it
Yeah,
wasn't like it wasn't curved in the sense that um like oh only so many people can get an A or whatever. If you earned it, you earned it, you know. But
right.
it's not
Well, and
like
how
law
else do
school.
they give everyone? Yeah, how else do they
Yeah,
give
like
everyone
if
A plus?
everyone performed like excellently, then everyone in theory could get a plus.
I will note that I think actually Georgetown would have counted as an A plus school because the way LSAC counts it is what shows up on your transcript and they recalculate. So perhaps
Mm.
you all, and this was my hypothesis was that it's the quote unquote elite schools that give A pluses. Um, And I just looked this up on ChatGPT because I don't know how else to find it. And it says 60 to 70% of US undergrads offer A pluses, but only 15 to 25% weight it. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not the school weights it because LSAC does their calculation. I don't think it's 60 to 70% though. That sounds wildly high because I talk to almost no one where this benefits them. It's
Hmm.
almost always the case. Though I do think it would make sense if it was the elite schools. Like it would make sense that the Ivy Leagues would do this because then it would, for the schools that kind of know the games they're playing and they want their guys to go off to. I mean, maybe that's just total correlation causation. Maybe it's not intentional, but my presumption would be that it's the elite schools that do this, whereas maybe the more average schools that are less aware of the games being played are not doing this. But either way,
Okay, actually, I just put up my transcript. I lied. We did not have A pluses. We had A's, but we did have like you could get like quote unquote an A plus in like an exam or a midterm, if that makes sense. And then that would, if you happen to get like a B plus or like an A minus in like the midterm, but you got like an A plus in the final, that could pull you up to an A. Does that make sense? So we had
yeah,
like individual A pluses, but not like as a course grade. I was like, I knew there was an A plus somewhere, but like it was in the way your actual exams could be scored, but not in like your class grades.
yeah, and I'm trying to look at the Ivies real quick just to see if my hypothesis holds water, which is that the more elite schools would give them, because my presumption, I guess, is that they would. But yeah. So Georgetown doesn't then. Interesting though, because I think the whole point with this though is that the whole idea that the schools actually are super holistic, it's just people buy it, and I don't know. It's frustrating because it's like almost hard to like fight the messaging constantly, but with between index numbers where the schools rank people just based on their incoming LSAT and GPA, and that buckets them
Mm-hmm.
into people we're going to admit versus people we're not going to admit, and then people we actually think about. Um, and then further, their behavior, like while they cry about how much they care about everything else, but then their numbers are so consistently narrow, where it's like they're clearly taking from a select band of people, or at least the top band that they can. It's
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It feels to me where it's like it's so clearly not holistic, but people keep saying that it is, which I guess it's a good selling point if you're a law school trying to get more people to apply. But the other thing I've come to recently is it feels like I've never heard a piece of advice from a law school or a law school admissions officer that has anything to do with other than just apply to our school as soon as possible. Like I've never heard one say apply. It always boils down to like, no, your plan is like it's which to me, I feel like is that not just indicative of they're not giving advice tailored to the person, but rather they're just giving blanket sales advice, which is let's get as many people in our school.
No, yeah, 100%.
Okay, so I did just get the Ivy ones. Harvard does not offer A pluses. Yale does not. Princeton, Columbia, Penn, Cornell, and Brown, it looks like all, and I guess Dartmouth as well. Oh no, Dartmouth does not give A pluses, nor does Brown. So half of them. I guess that's more than probably the overall population, but that's still not incredibly high. It's surprising that Harvard and Yale don't. But
Hmm.
yeah, Penn, Cornell all do. And then yeah, interesting. I guess that's surprising to hear, but I guess it's not that surprising. 4 out of 8 does seem like pretty high, actually. So I don't know. I just thought it was
Hmm.
interesting because there's all this talk about like how people can overcome it with their essays, not just essays, but especially this cycle with how intense everything's going to be. In fact, I'm just going to look up the current volume summary because I don't think we've talked since the application data came out, but it's up, or it was up 33%, and then it dropped to like 32%. But as of
Mm,
now, and actually, hold on, if this will load, LSAC has a really funny page. There, to me, it feels like almost a paradox question, but I'll just show it to you as opposed to describing it. So I liked their little
hmm.
exclamation point. It's too early to extrapolate things based upon this data. And then immediately under it, we have, I don't know, I just thought it was funny because for those of you watching on video, what you can see is immediately under.
All of these, like, yeah, all of these arrows.
Yeah, so they have this warning of like, hey guys, it's too early, don't extrapolate. And then immediately under that, they have 6 arrows talking about how literally everything is up. There's more applicants, there's more applications, there's more test takers, there's more applications versus the 4-year average. What I did find was interesting is that first time test takers is down. Well, it's not down, but it's down relative to the increase. So while the overall test takers are up 21%, there are 12.8% first time test takers. I will also note that there's way fewer test takers than there are applicants. So what this tells me is that there's a lot of leftover applicants from last year that are reapplying because they're not taking,
Yeah.
which is I just thought interesting because it goes a little bit deeper. The narrative, at least the way I see it, is that it actually is kind of slowing down, but we have a lot of bleed over from last cycle. And
Hmm.
not to say that there aren't, I mean, there's still more first time test takers, so it's still increasing, but it's not increasing as aggressively. Um, and yeah, applications are down to 31% increase, which, it's not down, but it was at 33, so it is starting to bleed off. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's too much advice to really give on this other than if you're not where you want to be, this probably is not the cycle for you. Like, I guess just
Yeah.
to extrapolate, so it's October 23rd, the November LSAT's in like a week. The next one people can take is January. Um, how much improvement do you think someone can reasonably make before January if they were to try to squeeze it in?
Like based off
I
if
guess just
like
in
where
general.
they are now, you mean?
Yeah, like let's say someone's starting to study. Let's just take like a pretty average person.
Oh, where there's okay.
Let's say they've studied a little bit. They're scoring like low to mid 150s. They want to crank into January. Yeah, I guess, what do you think like the likely outcome for something like that is?
I mean, the likely outcome is that it's probably not going to be enough time. I mean, there's always with people if they really lock in, and like, okay, I'm gonna, really go hard and give it the next. But how? What is it? Well, it's really only like two months of some change,
Yeah,
so it's really
not,
not
yeah,
even. It's less time than I thought. I thought it was like 3 months. So, I mean, even then, in that case too, even someone who's like really like that committed and could like would really be consistent and be able to make a lot of improvement, they could probably make even more just giving themselves an extra month, you know
yeah,
what I mean? And giving themselves 4 months versus 2.5 months. So why would you even want to shortchange yourself in that way? Most people aren't even going to get to that point where they're going to see, I think, the improvement they would want because they're just not going to be as focused. Especially, dude, this happens every year where people will say this. They're like, I'm just going to like go so hard until January, and then surprise, surprise, Christmas, holidays, New Year's, like all that stuff. People are like, oh, I'm just going to study through that. They don't. No one ever does. Like people always, I think, get not always, but people often just get like thrown off by all of the activities at the end of the year. And I don't know. I just think at that
yeah.
point, you're
Well, this is
um,
another thing you don't have to
typically
co-sign, but
gotta.
I say that last minute people tend to put in last minute effort, which is the type of person who's just starting the process in November is unlikely, or not November, it's October, but they're unlikely to be like really a grinder because if they were, they probably wouldn't just be starting now. So I find that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think your assessment's pretty accurate, which is that there are a few people that can make the progress, but it's pretty unlikely. And then further, even if you do, like if you are someone who can take that 155 to a 165 by January, that could be like the worst thing that ever happened to you because now you're applying in a very competitive cycle late. And also, if
Mm-hmm.
you can make that improvement, give yourself another few months to give you a 175 applying early next cycle
Yeah.
at actual Harvard, as opposed to like paying full price for like BU, which to me is just like,
Mm-hmm.
why would you do that to yourself? But people do, and people will every year. And it's actually, I mean, you see it, I see it, but the impatience that you 21-year-olds have will never cease to amaze me because you guys will legitimately fuck up your whole career because you don't want to take a gap year, which I know it doesn't sound nice when I say that, but like that is what the choice a lot of you make. And for what it's worth, it's your choice. If you want to do that, like knock yourself out. But it's mind blowing to me that people, I guess it's when you're at this age, prestige matters so much more than like life consequences. But promise like 50-year-old
Mm-hmm.
you will not be happy that you decided to pay 200K for BU when you could have studied for the LSAT a little bit more. It just seems so absurd to me. Um, so I guess just final thoughts on law school stuff. Do you have like a game plan for Thanksgiving and studying for the finals, or is this all TBD?
Well, I mean, I don't have like a game plan in the sense of like, oh, to the minute and the day, this is what I'm gonna do on this day, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, I mean, the general game plan is that, I think the the time that I'll be dedicating, to studying is probably going to be a little bit higher than it is now. I think, and in some ways, interestingly, I feel like a lot of the way I'm really trying to approach exams is a lot of the same strategies I had for the way I approach the LSAT in terms of like, it really shouldn't, I don't want it to feel like, oh, finals have come up on me and now I need, and I think this is often like the narrative that you see, like, on TikTok, like, oh, study 12 hours with me for finals. And it's like, well, why are we trying to cram all this stuff now when maybe we could have been, you know, just being working consistently over time? I think that's really the big thing. So I'm trying to, again, have that foresight to really start doing, preparing for exams now. And in some sense, I kind of already have, like, just really making sure I'm staying on top of everything, not missing class, not missing concepts, clarifying questions I have with professors, just really staying consistent in my work. And now just kind of looking more towards the actual application of all this stuff towards the exam, practice questions, multiple choice, essays, writing stuff out, doing the actual work and not just like, you know, studying the concepts, but actually, again, the application of doing it, just like the LSAT, right? We can't just read a book and cross our fingers and hope for the best. We have to actually practice the exams, do it, go through the motions, get comfortable with the timing, get comfortable with the anxiety, get comfortable with the stress, and my goal for my exams is to go in, feeling like it's just the practice that I've been doing and do it and that's it. Not to say like it's not stressful, but I'm someone who I don't like to feed the stress. Like that never helps.
Yeah, well, I think often people do make things into bigger things. Like I only had 1 year when I was really stressed during finals, and it were like where I like worked for like when I woke up to like when I went to bed, and it was the semester of college where I just bombed all my classes, and I think it was because I mean it's total correlation causation. The reason I bombed was not because I was stressed, but rather I was stressed because I hadn't done the work earlier in the semester. It's where like it now.
Yeah, no, me too. Whenever my worst exam periods were the ones where I had literally just like never gone to class or never done anything. And then I had to learn 3, 4 months worth of material in like a week. And I typically pull out all right, but like it was so much more stressful than it needed to be for that 1 week. Versus when I think back of like when I was really successful as a student in high school because I barely studied. I never studied for tests and stuff in high school. So I
Right.
just showed up to class every day. I just learned the stuff, made sense. And I say never study and maybe study a little bit, but I wasn't having to do this stuff. I actually think that's why for me, college was sometimes tough because I just didn't have. I like having the structure, of like, okay, I'm going to do this, whatever. And so that's why, as corny as it sounds, I really am grateful for the LSAT because I had to just learn, like, oh, if you want to do it, like the real world, like you're the one who has to hold yourself accountable. You're the one who has to give yourself that structure. And I think
Yeah.
it's really paid off. And I think it's hopefully, we'll see, hopefully it'll pay off in December. But
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And it is, I don't know, it's interesting because I think planning ahead on things can really get rid of so much of the pressure. And we see it over and over with at least the
yeah,
LSAT, where like the amount of people, and I get this question a lot actually right before an LSAT, where it's like, hey, I need LSAT tutoring for 2 weeks. And honestly, I kind of just tell people to get lost. I mean, in a
yeah,
more polite way, but it's just like, I don't know that I can help you. And further, it's like I'm setting you up for bad expectations if I tell you I can help you in just 2 weeks. It's like, are you kidding? Like, how would I possibly?
yeah,
Like you can give the best advice ever and go through so many questions and yeah your brain just will not have the time for it to like solidify and connect. So
yeah.
good life advice as always from Madeline, which is plan ahead, stop being a goofball, and get good grades. If you enjoyed what we talked about today or learned something new, please leave a review or a rating. It really does help us out and helps us reach more people. If you have a question or anything you want talked about in the world of LSAT or law school admissions, you can always email support@heyfuturelawyer.com to get it in the podcast agenda. Just put podcast in the subject and we will talk about it on the show. Alrighty, that's all we have for today. So I will see you all next time.